Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to IGCSE Success, your one-stop shop for everything first language English. As you'll notice, there's no me on the screen today. I've got a pretty nasty eye infection, and trust me, no one wants to see that. So it's just me and my voice and a whole bunch of slides, which I hope you will find useful. In this video, I'll be taking you through not one, not two, but 3 past paper directed writing questions, one for each text type. So buckle up, grab your favorite beverage of choice, a notebook, a pen, highlighter, etc. and let's get started. So yes, welcome to another edition of my CRAMMER'S guide, this time focusing on FLE, First Language English Paper 2, specifically the directed writing component. And in my opinion, this is by far the most challenging question of the whole exam, including both paper 1 and paper 2. There are just so many different skills you need to juggle, and it truly does require quite a bit of practice to get it right. The approach I'm sharing in this video, including how to structure your response, is the same one I teach my Key Stage 4 students. Of course, and I've said this before, teachers may have their own methods. That's absolutely fine. So find what works best for you. And also a big shout out to Taughtly, Schofield Shakespeare, and of course Miss Duckworth's classroom. They all have excellent videos on this question. Right, enough waffling, let's get started. So if you haven't guessed already, the 3 prescribed text types that you need to know are letter, speech, and article. So just these 3. So as long as you are familiar with, I guess, the generic features of each, you will be absolutely fine. If you are new to first language English, it's a good idea to practice writing these text types outside of a directed writing task. And it's also crucial to consider the purpose and audience of the task, as both of these will influence the language that you use and indeed the features that you incorporate into your final written piece. Now here's an example of a directed writing question in all of its glory. Now a question I often get asked is how this question differs from the extended writing response. So that's question 3 from paper 1. It looks pretty similar, right? Well, there's a key difference. There will always be 2 bullet points instead of 3, which I guess is an easy distinction. But the main difference lies in the skill required, the core skill required. You need to evaluate ideas from 2 non-fiction texts, which, trust me, can be tricky. A similarity is that just like paper 1, you'll need to assimilate ideas from the text and put them into your own words as much as possible. Oh, and when it comes to the word count, and I think I've said this on my previous video, take it with a pinch of salt. If time allows, I strongly recommend, I implore you to go over the word count. I know that's controversial, but I said it. Now let's quickly take a look at what it actually means to evaluate. I'm just going to read off the slides here. So one of the core skills needed to master the directed writing question is evaluating a range of explicit ideas and arguments presented across 2 short non-fiction texts. This means assessing their strengths and weaknesses, weighing them up, and forming a reasoned response. So doing a bit of probing. As for what it means to assimilate, another core skill assessed, well, to assimilate an idea from a text into your own writing means taking an idea from what you've read and including it into your own work, but making sure it fits within your own thoughts. I hope that makes sense. You might put it into your own words or use it to support what you're trying to say. It's kind of like borrowing someone else's idea and making it part of your own story or argument. Now let's take a look at what it means to evaluate an idea from a non-fiction text. I've written this short article from the perspective of a concerned and doting mum, discussing her child's use of YouTube. Let's read through it and then we can think about what kind of arguments she presents throughout the piece. YouTube, a blessing or a black hole? I'll admit it, YouTube has saved me more times than I can count. Need a quick dinner idea? YouTube. Struggling with algebra homework? YouTube. Want 5 minutes of peace whilst the kids are watching something educational? Yep, YouTube. It's a goldmine of knowledge, creativity and entertainment. It's all at the tap of a screen. But here's the problem. It doesn't stop. One video leads to another, and before you know it, your child, who started watching a history documentary, is now deep into conspiracy theories about the moon landing. And don't even get me started on those mind-numbing, fast-paced gaming videos that seem to hypnotize kids into a zombie state. Of course, YouTube isn't all bad. It's an incredible tool for learning, and plenty of creators put out genuinely brilliant and informative content. But as a mum, I worry about the algorithm's grip. It's designed to keep kids watching, not to ensure they are actually benefiting from what they see. So, where do we draw the line? Maybe it's time we take back control before YouTube raises our kids for us. Now, what does this look like in practice? So in yellow, you'll see an argument from the article. This is the point I'm going to evaluate. First, we need to understand what the argument is about. In this case, it's the concern that YouTube's algorithm prioritizes keeping children engaged rather than ensuring they consume beneficial content. Now, let's imagine the task is to write a letter to a friend to help alleviate their concerns about their children spending too much time on YouTube. We need to put that idea into our own words and then evaluate the pros, the cons, or both whilst offering a solution. Remember, the text type is a letter, so in addition to a simulation and evaluation, we must consider the style, the voice, the tone of our writing. Yes, I know, as I said before, it's a lot to juggle, guys. So you might end up with something that reads like this. I totally get where you're coming from, Sarah. YouTube's algorithm does seem to focus on keeping kids glued to the screen, even if the content isn't exactly helpful. That is my explicit idea, assimilated into my own words, into my own piece. That said, whilst it's true the platform pushes videos based on what they've watched before, we can't forget that there's also tons of great educational stuff out there. With a bit of guidance and supervision, kids can still get a lot of value from YouTube rather than just getting stuck in a loop of random videos. Kind of like what happens to me, guys. Now, I want you to remember this slide. Effective evaluation equals balance, and balance is key. You don't want to simply disagree with everything just for the sake of it. Instead, you want to craft a response that demonstrates you've considered both sides of the argument. This balanced approach shows a deeper level of understanding and thoughtfulness, and that's what you want to strive for with this question. Balance is key. Balance is key. Balance is key. Now let's move on to the exam stuff, the important stuff. I'll be walking you through 3 different directed writing questions as mentioned before. So we'll cover a letter, a speech, and an article task. Yes, guys, I'm pushing myself through this torture for you. First up is the article writing task. So let's take a read. So question 1. Write an article for your school or college newspaper about how young people should communicate in their first jobs. In your article, you should evaluate the ideas, attitudes, and opinions in both texts, advise young people on the factors they should consider when communicating with their work colleagues, and of course, the standard wording at the bottom. Base your article on what you have read in both texts, but be careful to use your own words. Address both of the bullet points. Write about 250 to 350 words. Write more than that. And of course, up to 50 marks are available for the content of your answer and up to 25 marks for the quality of your writing. That's a huge chunk. By the way, if you want to try any of these papers yourself, just make sure that you take note of the exam code. I do recommend practicing each of the text types. So before we dive into the insert, we need to understand the task, of course. A good acronym to remember is TAP. So text type, audience, and purpose. Now the text type here is obviously an article, so a catchy title and subheadings will work very well indeed. The audience is clearly a younger demographic, people in school or college. So your style, your language, your register, etc. should reflect this, but of course always use standard English. And the purpose will vary depending on the direction you choose to take, but it will likely be a mix of informing, arguing, and advising. I'll talk to you about the structure in a moment, but bullet point 1 is where all of your evaluation goes. Bullet point 2 is, I guess, in many ways, wrapping things up, offering an informed decision based on your own ideas and what you've read to form, I guess, a complete argument. I hope that makes sense. So what you're seeing now is the structure I use with my Key Stage 4 students. Every year I find myself tweaking it slightly, but this approach seems to consistently work and not overwhelm students or confuse them. As I mentioned earlier, there are different ways to tackle this question, but I find this method to be the most effective way. Your introduction, of course, should be brief, and remember, you can pick up valuable writing marks here. Make sure you establish a clear sense of audience and purpose straight away. Your main body paragraph 1 should focus on text A only, aim to evaluate 3 ideas in detail. Main body paragraph 2 focuses on text B. Following the same structure as the first paragraph, by the end you should have evaluated 6 ideas in total. And your last main body paragraph 3 wraps things up by drawing a conclusion of sorts. There are usually multiple strands to cover with its bullet point, so read the second bullet point carefully. And finally, if you've got time, offer a brief closing. For example, if it's a speech, this could be as simple as thanking the audience for listening and inviting any questions. Now it's time to read our first text, text A. One great thing about the directive writing question is that the texts are relatively short, and I think the vocabulary and arguments presented aren't too difficult to grasp. So let's dive in and take a read. Text A. So this passage is an article about how language in the workplace is changing. If you've ever tried to explain a meme, you know how big the cultural divide is between generations can be. And while yelling in capital letters and misunderstood emojis are harmless in an online family group chat, workplace communication is much more fraught. Workplace harmony depends on successful communication. Language gaps between senior leadership and newer employees are usually bridged by a shared grasp of business speak, the jargon that applies in specific areas of work. But now the first truly digital generation of young people is entering the workplace and messing up the English language, right? Often a virtual one, and workplace communication is undergoing a major shift. I think this is a little bit hyperbolic, but I do like to use emojis in work emails, FYI. Miscommunication is common to younger workers. Formal business communication seems cold and harsh, whilst younger people are too casual for others. Traditionally, the responsibility has been on younger workers to assimilate into office culture, but things are changing. Every generation has their own youth slang and pop culture code that they use in social situations. Older generations tended to adapt their ways of speaking and writing to the more formal expectations of the workplace, but staff in their 20s are keeping things much more casual. They are starting to pull down the barriers between work and personal or social life, naturally creating a more relaxed workplace. These are people who consider both meeting on a laptop and in an actual office to be face-to-face working after all. New workers who are digitally fluent now have far more influence over communication and culture. It goes beyond slang and internet speak abbreviations. A generation used to informal, near constant contact rejects accepted ways of doing things, spurring the prim email in favour of a quick message, emojis included. But that can be tough for older generations who are used to defining the professional rules of communication. Newer employees can be encouraged to maintain decorum and formality and maybe go easy on the emojis in emails, or perhaps we should run training on emojis for older managers. Who knows how people will talk and write to their colleagues and bosses when today's school students get their first job? Who knows? So once you finish reading text A, it's always sensible, of course, to think about the type of arguments being presented before going crazy with the highlighting. So this article in particular discusses how workplace communication is evolving with the entry of a digitally fluent generation. Gosh, that's a bit of a mouthful. Traditionally, younger employees adapted to formal business communication, but now they are reshaping workplace culture by adopting a more casual style. And some of the key arguments from this piece, the first one being younger workers and formal communication is cold, whilst older colleagues see casual language as somewhat unprofessional. Digital natives prefer quick messages with emojis over formal emails, challenging traditional norms. And lastly, the shift blurs the line between professional and social interactions, requiring a balance between formality and modern digital communication. So certainly some arguments that you can shoehorn into your own piece. Now let's read text B. So the following passage is taken from a letter from a reader written to a newspaper letters page. My eldest grandson, a smart, courteous, recent graduate and something of a high flyer, secured a good job straight out of university in one of the country's new, up-and-coming tech companies. We celebrated his tremendous success, and his parents, having struggled in their ordinary jobs to give him the best education, breathed a sigh of relief. So far so good. After a month, though, I'm seriously worried that his expensive education has not equipped him to deal with working life. I'm older, I know, but the way he speaks about and even to his colleagues and his superiors is going to land him in trouble, and he doesn't even seem to realise it. For example, in his induction course, a very senior staff member told the new recruits, "I'm always open to new ideas," something I doubt she meant literally. But my hapless grandson promptly sent her an email outlining all of his bright ideas for the company. I shuddered even more when he proudly showed me the email. It began, "Hi Megan," ending with one of those incomprehensible symbols. I guess that's an emoji, right? And a suggestion that they might do a face-to-face to discuss his ideas. Of course, I know offices aren't the stuffy, over-formal settings they once were when I first got my job, and a good thing too. I never even referred to colleagues I'd worked with for years by their first names, and that seems ridiculous now. We had silly business jargon then too, but my grandson's over-familiar slang, abbreviated words, and the constant messaging rather than a measured email can't be going down well, can it? How will he ever be taken seriously in his career if he doesn't learn to adapt to proper workplace behaviour in the way he communicates? Why would a young man who had the highest English grades not punctuate properly? He writes as if he's sitting in a cafe with his peers, not in a professional working environment. Oh, that made me laugh a little bit. So, of course, his letter expresses concerns about how younger generations communicate in the workplace. It uses the writer's grandson as an example, and despite his excellent and no doubt very expensive education, his overly casual language, informal emojis, and reliance on messaging may well harm his professional reputation. And some of the key arguments I managed to get from this text, the first one being younger workers may struggle to adapt to professional communication norms. Over familiarity, slang, and informal messaging can undermine credibility. And whilst workplace formality has relaxed over time, professionalism in communication remains essential for career success. And again, just to echo what I said before, these are some key arguments that you could include in your own piece. So what you are looking at now is a very simple table outlining 3 explicit ideas from each text. Obviously, drawing a table in the exam would be a complete waste of time. However, it is essential to identify key quotations. I mean, highlighting them is the quickest approach. You can highlight the insert. Both texts obviously present numerous arguments, so the choice is down to you really. Choose things that you have something pertinent to say. However, the ones I've selected are those I feel I can engage with the most effectively. And before I forget, obviously these ideas would need to be reworded or put into your own words as much as possible. And that's a skill that comes with practice. So now it's time to read a top band response. You'll notice a few key things here. Firstly, the box on the right provides an overview of my evaluation, including positive, negatives, and potential solutions. Again, I guess aiming for a balanced response. Additionally, I've color coded my 3 explicit ideas to match the previous table. So do go back and have a look at the table, and hopefully this will make it easier for you guys to track how they are being integrated. Hopefully you'll see how I've assimilated those ideas into my own words, something many students find challenging, but as I said before, practice is key. So let's take a read of the response. Starting with my very playful and facetious title. First impressions count, bruh. Nailing the communication game. I know someone's going to comment about my pronunciation of bruh, but I'm okay with that. The end of school is in sight, and you are already eyeing your first job. But your CV, well, it's either non-existent or filled with emojis and teen speak that might just land it straight in the rubbish bin. Don't worry, we've got you covered. Here's the lowdown on what's acceptable and what's not. Trust me, you won't want to turn the page just yet. Talking the talk, so this is my first main body paragraph, my first subheading. First off, language is a big deal in everyone's life. Our words can do a lot, so how you guys are going to communicate at work will matter. Effective communication keeps things smooth and ensures everyone's on the same page, creating a happier, more productive environment. Language evolves fast though. Some workplaces used to be all about jargon and formalities, but now slang and colloquialisms, yep, that's just a fancy word for slang, are creeping in. Is that a good thing? I'm all for the occasional meme, joke, or slang term to spice up a dull workplace, but here's the deal. Adaptability is key. You'll constantly adjust to different work environments. Finding the balance between being yourself and staying professional is important. Some workplaces have standards to follow. For your first job, though, it's probably best not to fire off emojis at your new boss. Keep things professional and neutral and play it safe. Hopefully you can see I've been a little playful with my language, and that's okay providing it is fit for audience and purpose. You do want to try and inject a bit of life, a bit of humour into your writing where appropriate. Voice is really important, guys. Now let's read the rest of the response. So my second subheading is speak up but know when to tone it down. So this is my second main body paragraph with the other 3 explicit ideas from text B. Now, in an ideal world, there'd be no stigma around how we communicate. After all, it reflects our personalities and adds a bit of colour to our identity. But let's be real, some jobs, especially those in the corporate world, might need you to tone down the bruh talk. Undoubtedly, balance is key though. Standard English, yes, leave slang at the door, still matters. We don't want to butcher the English language too much. So a little bit of life, a little bit of humour, guys, that's okay. Life, especially in the world of business, is about following rules, and poor communication can affect your chances of moving up. Schools, let's be honest, parenthesis, arguably, are exam factories, so language skills outside of the English class aren't always a focus. But adjusting your language to fit different situations is a vital life skill, and you'll probably learn it on the job for better or worse. And bullet point 2, here's my last paragraph, and the subheading is email, emojis, and everything in between. Lastly, when you're communicating with future colleagues, whether it's in person, over email, or in message, it's all about reading the room. Is the tone relaxed or formal? Adjust accordingly. Slang and emojis can be fun, but use them wisely. A casual hey or a light emoji might work with close colleagues, but don't overdo it, especially in professional emails or formal conversations. Stick to clear and direct language to avoid misunderstandings. Also pay attention to how people respond. Listening is just as important as speaking. And remember, even if you're joking around, always be respectful and professional. It's about striking the right balance. Be yourself, but know when to dial back the casual vibes. Now, let's read a sort of overview of my evaluation. So positive evaluation, it highlights the importance of language for smooth, productive work environments. Negative evaluation, well, whilst slang can be fun, it might compromise professionalism in certain situations or settings. And suggested solution, well, it advises staying professional in your first job, adapting to workplace norms whilst maintaining your personality. So again, balance is key. And for the second half of the response, the positive evaluation, it values communication as a reflection of identity, emphasizing how it adds color and personality. The negative evaluation, it acknowledges that some environments, especially corporate ones, require a more formal tone, which may restrict informal language like slang. And suggested solution, it advises adapting language to fit different contexts, recognizing that this is an important life skill often learned in the workplace. And guys, giving solutions is really, really important. You don't need to give a solution to every explicit idea, but you cannot just agree. Certainly, you cannot just disagree with everything without offering solutions. That's really important. Right, so let's swiftly move on to the speech task. Again, guys, if you want to have a go at this paper, just take note of the exam code on the right there. This is the 050023 paper from the October-November 2024 series. So let's take a look at the task. So there is a proposal for your local area to become cash-free. Gosh, you want to share your views on this proposal at a meeting of local residents. Write a speech giving your views on whether or not the proposal should go ahead. In your speech, you should evaluate the ideas, attitudes, and opinions given in both texts. Consider some of the ways that being cash-free might affect individuals, businesses, and the wider community. So there's always quite a few strands in bullet point 2 and the usual wording at the bottom. Now, hopefully you can glean from the task that the style and register we'll be using will be significantly different from the article task. There's certainly, I think, less scope for playful or light-hearted language here. This task is a blend of persuasion and information, and it needs to sound as though you are actually delivering a speech to, I guess, an imagined audience. And with that in mind, consider what persuasive techniques or a ripe forest techniques you can use. That's the acronym that I use to engage your listeners or audience effectively. So let's read text A, and then we need to think about what kind of arguments are being presented throughout the piece. So text A, slightly longer, let's take a read. So paying digitally, will paying by cash soon be a thing of the past? As more retail outlets, festivals and transport networks adapt to contactless cards and tap-and-go digital technology, fewer people are paying by cash. In some UK cities, buses and cafes simply refuse to handle notes or coins. Many shops worldwide, from health food stores to local bakers, already only accept payment by cards and other digital technology. And of course, this is exacerbated by that horrible sea that took over the world, with retailers describing going cash-free as cleaner and safer. From Seattle to Singapore, cities are spearheading a global drive to go digital. Cash is a dinosaur, it seems. Many people are happy to tap cards or phones to hop on a bus, buy a coffee or pay for groceries, and no longer need to carry cash at all. But what might the rise of the cashless city mean for street vendors and market traders, street performers, waiters, or any charity relying on people donating their spare change? People on the lowest incomes often can't get a bank account and may become excluded from mainstream commercial life by their dependence on traditional forms of currency. There's also little enthusiasm for abandoning cash, mostly among demographic lines. Older people in rural areas are the least tech savvy and resent the emergence of entirely cash-free urban zones. The beauty of cash is that it's simple direct transactions between all kinds of different people, rich, poor, old or young, explains financial writer Damien Giels. If society goes cash-free, there's a real danger of exclusion. Big businesses equipped with the latest online technology increasingly insist that bills are paid electronically. Some offer discounts for services purchased digitally, like train tickets. Some banks offer training on payment technology for independent traders, though considerable running costs remain for small businesses that need to accept payment from customers keen to do everything digitally. The defense for pushing everyone into using digital payments is that a clear trail can be followed whenever a payment for goods or services is made, but some cultures are deeply reluctant to give up cash. In some countries, according to recent surveys, most consumers believe that using cash gives them better control over their spending. I would have to agree with this, actually. More on that later, by the way. It's senseless to try to make everyone go cash-free, argues Giels. But big stores see younger customers using payment apps on their phones to buy everything. The ease of electronic payments is simply too attractive. So this article very much explores the shift towards a cashless society, highlighting both the benefits and concerns surrounding digital payments. And whilst many embrace the convenience of contactless transactions, others worry about the exclusion of certain groups who rely on cash. Some of the key arguments I pulled from this article. First of all, the rise of digital payments is making cash increasingly obsolete, especially in urban areas. A cash-free society could exclude low-income individuals, the elderly and small traders. And whilst businesses benefit from digital transactions, cash remains valuable for financial control and inclusivity. And again, these are arguments you could shoehorn into your own piece. So let's read text B, and this is a blog. Do you still use cash? This passage is a blog about the writer's spending habits. Scrolling through my online bank statements recently, I was surprised to find that I hadn't removed cash from my cash machine for months. Had I not been spending? I wish. No, it just seems that thanks to technology, it's become increasingly easy to glide around the restaurants and shops and cafes, dispensing my personal wealth. I feel you. Driving my son back from school yesterday, I realised another consequence of my pay-by-card habit. I needed to buy fuel from the garage, and as ever, the pressure was on me to add that tempting bag of his favourite sweets to my bill. Negotiations complete, we decided we could use his pocket money for the purchase. I like my son to develop a responsible attitude to spending. Going up to the counter himself to pay and check his change is an important way to reinforce both math skills and the value of hard-earned cash. However, further examination, I see where this is going, revealed I had no cash in my wallet to give him as his allowance. Once back home, I could find only the crumpled banknote I kept in my running shorts, a safety precaution when heading out for a run. Eventually, I raided my emergency fund, a bottle in my kitchen, where I saved small change to pay my debts. Today, tucking my bank card firmly away, I decide to see how far real cash will get me. Not far. Any high-priced items, it seems, are strictly a cashless affair. My rent, telephone bill among them. I meet with baffled expressions and some resistance from the assistant at the agency I rent my apartment from. I can't remember the last time we received a cash payment, she says. We don't like keeping cash in the office. We don't have a safe and banks charge you for depositing cash. I see her point. Later, as my daughter cracks open her money box and counts out her small stash of coins, I realise that the cost of depositing her savings into her bank account this month will wipe them out. I didn't know this was a thing in the UK, guys. I've not been in the UK for a long time, but do banks charge you to put savings into your account? That it just seems crazy to me. Now, this blog clearly reflects the writer's increasing reliance on digital payments and the declining use of cash. And whilst this is convenient, this shift raises concerns about financial habits, teaching children about money, and the practicality of cash in everyday transactions. And some of the key arguments I've highlighted are below. So digital payments have made spending effortless, reducing awareness of cash flow. The decline of cash makes it harder to teach children financial responsibility. And lastly, many businesses discourage or reject cash, making it impractical for larger payments. Now, here are the explicit ideas I have identified from each of the texts. Remember, I've color coded them so you can see how I've integrated them into my own writing in my own words. And here is my top band response. Do pay close attention to the opening. It immediately establishes a sense of audience and purpose. It should feel as though I'm speaking directly to an imagined audience. I would avoid the traditional, hi, my name is, I'm here to talk about, as it's quite dull, it's quite boring, it's quite tedious. Instead, aim for something more engaging, maybe starting with an anecdote, an imperative, a rhetorical question, etc. So let's take a read of the response. Let's talk about something inevitable, a cashless society. Whether we like it or not, it's only a matter of time. Thank you all for being here today. Your presence is truly appreciated. I'm here to explore whether our community should embrace the shift to fully digital payments. Fewer people use cash and entire cities are going digital. My first explicit idea. Honestly, whenever I see someone pay for cash, it almost feels old-fashioned. Digital payments are undeniably inconvenient. No bulky wallets, just a quick tap on my phone. But I recognize not everyone feels the same. So this is my evaluation, guys, a balanced argument. Some struggle with technology and not everyone has easy access to banking. So my second and third explicit ideas there reworded. Even I've had moments where tap and go failed me. Instead of eliminating cash entirely, we need a transition that supports everyone. Here's my evaluation. Banks must offer better assistance. We need stronger education around digital payments to ensure no one is left behind. Here's the dilemma. As much as I love digital currency, I found myself spending more since ditching my wallet and using my phone. So in the red there, you'll see my first explicit idea from text B. The ease of it makes spending effortless, sometimes without even realizing it, until I check my statement. With cash, you have a clear sense of your budget. We must stay mindful of this to avoid financial problems. Plus, technology can fail, so keeping a few notes or coins for emergencies is still necessary. I've lost count of how many times my banking app has gone down. True story, actually. I used to love saving coins, but with banks charging high fees to deposit savings, it makes you wonder, maybe it's time to ditch cash after all. Now, let's consider how going cash-free might impact us, our businesses, and our community. So notice with the last paragraph, guys, I am addressing all of the strands. For many of us, it could make everyday transactions more convenient, but also lead to less control over spending. It's too easy to swipe your phone without thinking twice. If we own businesses, the shift could streamline operations and reduce cash handling costs, but it might also exclude customers who prefer or rely on cash. On a community level, a cash-free society could widen the gap for those without access to digital banking or technology, further isolating vulnerable groups. So whilst the move towards a cashless society brings plenty of benefits, we have to consider the potential downsides and ensure everyone can keep up with the change. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer any questions you may have. Now, let's go back and take a quick look at an overview of my evaluation. So again, positive evaluation, it highlights the convenience of digital payments, calling them undeniably convenient. Negative evaluation, it identifies challenges such as people struggling with technology or having limited access to banking, showing a critical evaluation of the shift. And suggested solutions, well, the call for more support from banks and better education around digital payments reflects an evaluative stance. Fingers crossed it does anyway. And it offers a way forward to balancing the benefits and challenges. For the second half of the response, my positive evaluation, well, it looks at the ease of using digital currency and how it simplifies transactions and eliminates the need for a wallet. And my wallet, trust me, it's pretty bulky. It's got about 20 different cards, these garishly coloured credit cards. Negative, digital payments can lead to overspending, as if it's easy to lose track of expenses until checking the statement. And solution, staying mindful of spending and keeping a small amount of cash for emergencies in case of technology failures. Whew, my goodness, guys, we are almost at the finish line. Our final text type, letter writing, and I guess in many ways, probably one of the more straightforward text types to construct, I would say. So let's take a read of the task. So a friend has asked for advice about whether or not to lie to avoid attending an event that they might find boring or embarrassing. Write a letter to your friend giving your advice. In your letter, you should evaluate the ideas, blah, 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 the usual wording, and give advice to your friend about how to respond, giving your reasons for the approach you suggest, and then the usual wording at the bottom. So it's an informal letter to a friend. Woohoo! I actually love these more informal text types because to some extent, yes, to some extent, you can throw the English language rule book out the window and be a bit more playful, a bit more creative with your choices. Obviously, the purpose here is to give advice, so keep that in mind as you are constructing your letter. And yes, I've said you can be playful, creative. As much as possible, you still want to use standard English. So don't be using the kind of slang that perhaps you use amongst your social settings. Yes, no bra in this letter, okay? No bra. So let's read text A. So the following passage is part of a magazine article about telling the truth. Okay. Fibs, exaggeration, and embellishments. There are many words we use to disguise the fact we often tell lies to smooth social conversations or deflect minor conflict. For example, if you are late to a meeting or you've missed a deadline, it is often tempted to manufacture a face-saving excuse which you, and sometimes the person to whom you offer the excuse, know to be untrue. So a little white lie. You don't want to talk to someone, so you ask a colleague to tell the person that you're out of the office or in a meeting. We all do it. You look lovely when they don't. Or I'll call you when you have no intention of calling. Anyone guilty? It is difficult to criticize such lies that seem so harmless. However, there is usually a way to manage these cases without lying and still stay out of an awkward situation. If you are late, you can simply admit it and apologize. The people with whom you are meeting don't need to know what delayed you, and the ambiguity is better than deceit. Similarly, when you want to be available, you can simply say, I can't talk about this now, but would be glad to get back to you later. Leaving it vague is not the same thing as lying. It's not the same thing as telling a lie. In some situations, we ought to be truthful, though often aren't. For example, when someone asks for your evaluation of a presentation made at work or college, it's easy to say, it was great, I liked it, but that may be missing an opportunity to give helpful, constructive feedback if the presentation wasn't good. You can praise the parts that were genuinely praiseworthy, but also point out what might be improved for the next presentation. We may try to convince ourselves that some types of lies are acceptable because they are minor. This includes making an elaborate excuse for why you haven't completed a task, or inventing some fictitious prior appointment when you just don't want to attend an event, but don't want to offend. We may be especially susceptible to this kind of deceit if we can convince ourselves that it's common practice, which it is, guys, that nobody meets deadlines or wants to waste their time at boring events. We may rationalize our behavior as compensation for a perceived injustice against us. I deserve better because I work harder than others for the same salary. These are deceits which have no other object than to gain something we know we can only get by lying. So obviously this article discusses the use of small lies in social interactions and very much suggests that whilst they may seem harmless, honesty or vague responses are better in the long run. It highlights the need for constructive feedback and warns against rationalizing minor deceptions. And some key arguments include: small lies can be avoided with honesty or vagueness. Constructive feedback is often sacrificed for flattery. And rationalizing deceptions undermines trust. So, text B, the following passage is an article about children's development. Interesting. Do we teach children to lie? How many of us tell kids or students that everything is fine when, in fact, everything is totally wrong, so as to not worry them? Are you always honest about how you feel about things? Do you praise children's efforts at school when you really think they are terrible? We don't just lie to protect our kids from hard truths either. We actually coach them to lie, such as when we ask them to express delight at underwhelming gifts or how tasty a meal was. These are what scientists call pro-social lies, falsehoods told for someone else's benefit. They're okay if it's going to prevent some sort of conflict or make someone upset, right? We develop the ability to lie very early. By age 5, almost all children can and will lie to avoid punishment, and a minority will sporadically tell pro-social lies. From ages 7 to 11, they begin to reliably lie to protect other people or to make others feel better, and they'll start to consider these lies to be necessary and good. Current research suggests that children are motivated by feelings of empathy and compassion. Sometimes lying can reveal the good in people. It's a feeling of empathy that drives children to tell such lies. In fact, they are trying to resolve a conflict between honesty and kindness, and they start coming down on the side of kindness. This involves moral and emotional reasoning, and far from reflecting laziness, seems to entail a great deal more sophistication than truth-telling. A lot of scientific research has gone into the impact of lying. The conclusion of all of this research: not all lies are the same, a fact we seem to recognize deep in our minds and bodies. We may indeed teach children to lie both implicitly with our behavior and explicitly with our words, but some of those lies help to bind our families and friends together and to create feelings of trust. Other kinds of lies destroy those bonds. This all might seem overly complex, more so than the simple prescription to not tell a lie. The trouble with do not lie prohibitions is that we can all plainly see that lying is everywhere. So, of course, this article explores how children learn to lie, including both protective lies and pro-social lies, which are intended to benefit others. It argues that lying, driven by empathy, can be complex and even beneficial, helping to maintain social harmony and trust within relationships. And some key arguments include: children are taught to lie early, both to protect themselves and others. Pro-social lies driven by empathy can be morally complex but help maintain social bonds. And not all lies are harmful. Some strengthen relationships and trust. Now here are my 3 arguments from each text. If I haven't stressed this enough, you are expected to use your own words as much as possible, so do not lift or copy from the text. So let's read our final top band response. Another woohoo! Do take note of my brief introduction, which not only demonstrates an awareness of audience and purpose, but also serves, I guess, as a solid foundation or springboard into the main body paragraph, and that's what you always want to try and achieve. So, dear friend, I hope you're doing well. When I heard about your dilemma, I just had to weigh in. Should you tell the truth or bend the facts to avoid yet another family gathering you're clearly not feeling? It's a tricky one, I get it. I'll share my thoughts, but at the end of the day, it's totally up to you. Take my advice however you see fit. So, where do I begin? Honestly, a little white lie can seem harmless. After all, who's really hurt if you skip your uncle's annual gathering? Trust me, I know how boring they can be. That said, honesty is usually the best policy. Small lies can snowball, and before you know it, the line between harmless avoidance and deception gets blurred. maybe the best approach is to be tactfully honest. Say you can't make it without making up a story. Bending the truth might also help avoid conflict. But remember, relying on dishonesty can erode trust and harm relationships. Is that really what you want with your family? You could always be honest without being blunt. There's no need to say, hey uncle, your gatherings are boring. Sometimes a little vagueness can keep things smooth. Just make sure you don't sound too insincere. Finding the right balance between honesty and tact is key. And my second main body paragraph reads, look, I've known you for years and I get it, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're leaning towards lying because you're naturally kind and empathetic and you don't want to create an awkward situation. Am I right? Here's something to consider. Maybe coming up with a small excuse for your uncle will keep him happy. Maybe kindness is more important than absolute honesty. After all, sometimes it's these small white lies that hold our families and friendships together because, well, the truth can hurt, right? That said, the moral dilemma here is that the strongest relationships are arguably built on honesty. So this, of course, is all of my evaluation. In the same breath, lying isn't always a bad thing. It can actually bring out the best in people, like when someone lies to protect or support someone else. Of course, habitual dishonesty can be harmful in the long run, but in the end, it's about finding the right balance. I hope I haven't muddied the waters too much, but hey, at least I've given you both sides of the argument. Only you can decide what's right for you. If you think being brutally honest is the way to go, telling your uncle that, quite frankly, you're tired of his family get-togethers and would rather be anywhere else, then go for it. Maybe just soften the blow a little. Rather than laying it all out there, you could be a little more tactful. Maybe take a more euphemistic approach. Something along the lines of, things have been really busy lately, or I need some downtime, or if he's really looking to catch up, why not suggest meeting for coffee instead? I'm sure he'll appreciate the effort. I don't think this will make or break the relationship as long as you handle it with care. You shouldn't have to go somewhere if your heart's not in it. That's my final takeaway for you. Let me know how you get on, John. And in terms of my evaluation for the first half, so the positive evaluation, it acknowledges that whilst small lies might seem harmless, being honest is usually the better approach to avoid complications. The negative evaluation, it highlights the danger of small lies snowballing into bigger issues, blurring the lines between harmless avoidance and deception. And suggested solutions, it suggests being tactfully honest, declining an invitation without completely fabricating a story, finding that right balance between honesty and tact to maintain a healthy relationship. And the positive evaluation for the first half values kindness and empathy, suggesting that a small white lie to protect someone's feelings might strengthen relationships and avoid conflict. Negative evaluation, it recognizes the tension between kindness and honesty, pointing out that lying can be harmful if it becomes habitual. So if it becomes the norm and erodes trust in the long run. And suggested solution, it advises finding a balance between honesty and tact, suggesting that whilst honesty is important, occasional white lies may be necessary to preserve relationships without causing unnecessary hurt. And guys, if you've made it all the way to this point, in the comments in capital letters, write, I made it. I'll leave you with a reminder of the structure I use with my students. As always, thank you so much for watching and your support. It truly means the world to me. Good luck if you have your paper 2 next week, and do let me know how it goes. Until next time, bye bye.